Good afternoon ladies and gentlemen, your boy Virtus here, and in today's video we are going to be showing you how you can set up a simple crouch system for our game. So if you take a quick look at my viewport here, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. When I hold down the control key, the player drops down to the ground, and you can see he's now on his knees and he moves quite slowly. When I let go of the crouch key by just releasing the control key, it makes me go back to normal speed and I can continue running as I normally would, and it's really great. And the simplest way to show you this system is to simply open up my animation blueprint and show you it in a third person view, so you can see exactly how we're doing this with the animations, with the variables, and all the awesome blueprints that we've got. So I'm going to quickly open up my SWAT_anim blueprint just to show you what I've created. Now bear in mind, everything that I've created here is not going to be an issue for you guys. We're going to be switching back to the version that you've got in just a second. But first I want to show you exactly what we're going to be creating. So inside of my anim preview editor, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my speed up, and I'm going to set this to something like 300. So you can see here my character is walking. As soon as I toggle on my crouch variable, you can see he returns to this lower down below position of crouching on his knees, and it looks really great. And that even works if the player's not moving, so when they idle they're also going to be down on their knees as well. It's really great, and I'm really looking forward to showing you guys how to set this up. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into the version of the engine you've got and get started. Okay, so now that we're actually in the same page as you guys are in terms of the engine, we can start setting up our crouch animation. It's really simple and easy to do, so let's get started. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into my content browser, and I need to create another blend space similar to the one for the walk and run. All we're going to be doing is doing pretty much the same thing, however we're going to be changing the animations that it used. Instead of using the walk and sprint, running and all that kind of animations, we're just going to be telling it to use the crouch animations instead. So right click in your content browser, go to animation and create a normal blend space. And then for the skeleton for this, just go ahead and set this to SWAT_skeleton, and then just give this the name crouch_BS. And then once you've done that, go ahead and open it up, and we can start putting our animations into here. Now luckily the pack that I introduced for my animations includes crouch animations, so we can just continue on with those. So what I'm going to do first is actually set up the idle animations for this crouch system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my animation for idle_crouching_aiming, and I'm going to drop that down to the 0 values all the way at the bottom here. So going to do the same thing all the way there at the bottom, and you can see in the little preview window my player has actually dropped down to the ground and is crouching, which is sort of part of our system setup. Now before I start moving the forward values, putting the animations into there, I actually need to make sure I actually set up my axes settings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the horizontal axes to direction in the panel on the left, and then I'm going to put the vertical axes to speed as well. Now for the values for minimum and maximum over here, what I'm going to do is set this to 180, so minus 180 and 180, similar to what we did in the other one. And then for speed on the second panel is actually going to go from 0 to 300. The reason why I'm doing that is because our speed for crouching is going to be slightly slower than our normal run speed. We're just going to half it and put it down to 300. So now that we've done that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and find the rest of my crouching animations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can find my walk_crouching forward in place, and I'm going to put this all the way at the top over here. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add in my forward, left and place stuff in as well. So I'm going to find my walk_crouching_forward left in place, and then I'm just going to put this to the left of it, and I'm going to do the same thing for the right. I'm going to move it to the right of that, and if I use my little preview now by holding down shift, you can see he can walk forwards, and he can also crouch left, and he can crouch right as well, and that's looking quite good. Now we also have our backwards ones in there, so I'm going to quickly drop those in as well, and I'm going to put those to the top left and the right corners, as those values sort of equate to going backwards. So if we preview it now, go all the way over here, and then you can walk backwards, and that's all good. So that is pretty much everything for our blend space setup. So what I'm going to do now then is go into the animation blueprint, and we can set up the state for this blend space. So go ahead and save this, make sure you don't lose any of your work, and then just close it up. From there, what we're going to do is open up our animation blueprint. And then inside of here, we've got to create the crouching state. So what we got to do is to go over to our walk and run stuff over here, and then inside of this, drag out from your idle and create the new state for crouching. And simply just call that crouching. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to drag it down over here just so we get a bit of distance from the rest to make it look a little bit less cluttered. And then from here, with our walk and run, we also want to drag from walk and run to crouching, and at the same time we also need to drag back from crouching to walk and run, and drag back from crouching all the way over to idle. The reason why I'm doing this is because I want the player to be able to go into this crouching state from either of these two states that we've got here. So what I'm going to do now then is open up my crouching state, and I'm simply going to drag in my crouching blend space into the result. So just drag it in from the asset browser in the bottom right, hook it up to the result, and then for direction and speed, all we're doing is simply just hooking up our direction and speed we used previously, and then just putting it just in there, just like that. So, now that that's done, our blend space is all hooked up. However, we don't really have any rules for when it can actually go into the blend space. The engine doesn't know when we're crouching. So that's something that we've got to set up in just a moment. And that's all going to be put into these little conditional rules that we've got here, or the transitional rules that we've got. But before that, I need to set up a crouching variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to close this now, and I'm going to open up my third person character. My third person character is inside of my blueprints folder. Just go ahead and open this up. And what I'm going to do, bottom left hand corner, is I'm going to create a variable for crouch, and then I'm just going to call this crouch true. And I'm going to leave this as the variable type set to boolean. And now with this boolean, what I can do is I can change this when we press an input. But I want to create this input properly, so what I'm going to do is close that, go to my project settings, and then once our project settings are up, all we got to do is just go into the input panel and set up the action mapping, and then from that action mapping we can just call that later on in our blueprints, and it just keeps things nice and tidy, nice and clean, and we know when we right click and type in crouch, it's going to say crouch exactly. Now bear in mind that my project settings are loading up a bit slow at the moment, so I'm going to quickly pause the video and we'll get straight back into it. Okay, so we're inside of our project settings now, and let's set up that action mapping. So hit input on the left hand side, go to action mappings, and then from here what we're going to do is just press the little plus add to action mapping, and then we're simply going to call this crouch. And then the key for this is going to be whatever you want your key for crouching to be. Now for me, that is simply just going to be my left control. So I'm going to scroll all the way down and I'm going to find my left control on there. Now if you wanted to, you could also bind it to your right control as well. So press add here for a second control, and then just go to keyboard, scroll all the way down and just find your right control. Now bear in mind, if you wanted to, you can also add in the stuff for the game controllers as well. So if you want it to be like B or square or anything like that, depending on the controller, you can do that. And this is why I like using the project settings and the inputs in here, is we can add additional keys into one single mapping. Whereas if we was to do it through the engine inside of blueprints, we would just have to create loads and loads of different events for each one of these different controls. It's just a lot simpler and a lot easier this way. So closing our project settings now, open up our third person character, and then if we right click and if we go ahead and type in crouch, we should now have an action event for crouch. So event for when the key bound to input action crouch are pressed or release, click that. And then from here now, all we're essentially going to be doing is setting crouch to true. So drag out a reference to your variable for crouch true, set that, press Ctrl C, Ctrl V, we need 2 of these, and then just go ahead and hook it up to pressed and released. So what we're going to do now then is when the player actually presses the key for the first time, it's going to make them crouch, and when they release it, so when they let go of the control key, it's going to set it back to untrue. Now, one other thing that we need to do is we actually need to change the character movement speed, because at the moment it's going to be way too quick and it's going to be going over the 300 value that we set in the blend space. So what I'm going to do is grab a reference to my character movement, and then from here I'm simply going to type in set max walk speed, and that's the one that we're after. And once again, we're going to select this, press Ctrl C to copy it and Ctrl V to paste it, as we need 2 of these. And we're just going to hook it up just like that. And there we are. So set crouch true to this one and set crouch untrue to this one. So when we're trying to slow down the character, we're going to half its movement speed. So we're going to drop it from 600 all the way down to 300. And then once they release it and it's going back to normal, you need to push it back to the normal speed, which is currently set to 600. And that's all good. So what we can do now then is we can compile this, and that's pretty much everything in our third person character that's all set up and ready. So what we need to do now then is actually use that variable and that system that we've just made and turn it into our transitional rules inside of our animation blueprint. So go into your character, open up your animation blueprint, give it a second to load up, and now we need to hook it up into all of these. And it's really simple to do, but before I can do that, I need to get a reference to that value and actually store it inside of my animation blueprint, because having it in the third person character is just absolutely no good. So inside of our event graph, go to then one and then drag this out and just simply cast to the character. So cast a character, if I can type it correctly, and then object is simply going to be try get pawn owner. And then from this, as the character, drag it out and type in get is crouch true, or get is crouched, get crouch true. Okay, so we can't get it from this one because we are casting to the character and not the third person character, so go ahead and change this. So cast to third person character, and then object wildcard is going to be the same again. As third person character, just type in crouch, if I can type it in. Okay, so CROA, so get crouch true, get a reference to that. And then all we're going to do is simply promote this to a variable. And this variable is also going to be called crouch true, just like that. So now that we've done that, just go ahead and hook this up just like that. And all this is doing now is simply telling the engine and telling the animation blueprint whether or not our crouch is is equal to true, because at the moment it's just in the third person character and we can't actually use that in our animation blueprint. In the same way, we had to get the values from our speed and direction from our third person character earlier on, and then just move it on to our own values inside of here. So what I'm going to do now then is I am going to open up my states again, and then I'm going to set up these little transitional rules. It's really simple to do. So for the first one, going from idle to crouching, I'm going to open this up, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply get a reference to crouch true, and then I'm going to drag out my can enter transition and type in boolean, and the one that I'm looking for is equal boolean. So what it's going to do is return true if the value that's hooked up to it is set to true. So hook this up here, crouch true, and if it's equal to being true, so going from idle to crouching, it's going to go into our crouching blend space and it's going to work. Now I need 4 of these, so for each of the different directions that we've got. So I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to go back into my states. And I'm going to do the same thing from going from walk to our crouching state, open it up, Control V to paste it in here, and then I'm going to hook it up just like that. Now then, what I'm also going to have to do is our rules for going backwards as well. So what I'm going to do is get our crouching to walk and run, and then I'm going to paste this in here as well. Now there's one slight change that we need to do for this. We need to make sure this is unchecked. So if crouching is no longer true, it's going to go back to our walk, on this up, paste it in, and then hook this up just like that. So if we compile it now, all of our errors at the bottom should go, and if we go into our game, press play, it should now crouch when we press the button. So press Control, the play is going to drop down to the ground, and that's working all good. So we've got our crouching in the game, and you can also see that we're now moving slower when we're crouching. And if we was to walk forwards, and as we let go of crouch, the speed is going to go back all the way up and it returns to our normal running animation. So that's pretty much everything for our crouching animation, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it just as much as I have. Once again, thanks for watching, stay awesome, keep creating, your boy Virtus, signing out. This series was made possible by you guys supporting me on Patreon. If you want to help create other series like this, then check out my Patreon page in the link in the description.